Hello, friends. Scott here. Today, we're going to talk through planning out a budget for a record label. So, this could be a new label that you're planning on creating or a record label you already have, and you just want to kind of look at what your annual budget might be, or you might want to look at what your startup budget might be. That's what we're going to discuss today. I have a free template I'm going to give you. We're going to talk about the different categories that you would find in a budget. We're going to talk about really quickly why do you need a budget and kind of the power behind having a budget for your record label. And then let's break down an actual budget that I've laid out for you. I want to clarify, by the way, that we are talking about a budget for the operations of a record label, starting a business or running a business. Now, there's also budgeting for an album release, and I'm going to do a completely separate video and a completely separate template for budgeting out releasing an album, manufacturing, distribution, that kind of stuff. All of this, including the template that I'm going to show you today, can be downloaded for free at otherrecordlabels.com/budget. This is where you can get an Excel spreadsheet that you can alter for yourself. You can look at what I've put in there as placeholder under these categories, which we'll discuss in a second. But you can make it your own. And that's what you can get from otherrecordlabels.com/budget. And we'll do a separate one for an album release. But today we're just talking about the actual record labels. Before we begin, there's three things I want to talk about. Number one is offense and defense. And so when I put together a budget, I think a lot about defense. And so defense would be keeping your expenses down, right? To use a sports analogy, it's like keeping goals out of the net. The same when it means to not spending a lot of money when you're building a record label or when you're planning an album release, is keeping your expenses down. Because the idea is, let's think about using the sports analogy of like winning a game is similar to being profitable and as a record label. And so the way we do that is we try to increase our revenue, which is like our offense, and increasing our scoring. But at the same time, it's equally important, if not more important, to keep goals out of our net and to keep our expenses down. And that's why I call it defense. So I want you to keep that in mind as we build out our budget, because we could really add anything. And I talk to a lot of people who think, oh, I'm going to rent an office space and I'm going to buy all this nice equipment and we're going to invest in a printing press and or like a record pressing plant or whatever. Maybe that's you, but it's really good to keep in mind being profitable is not just generating revenue, that's great, but also keeping your expenses down is an easier way to be profitable. Like I mentioned, when you look at my budget template, and we're going to go through it together in a second, it's completely customizable for your own needs. Nothing on this list is mandatory. I would say like 99.9% of the stuff is not mandatory. I mean, you don't need to register an LLC. You can file your taxes under your own thing. You don't need to hire a graphic designer. You could make the logo by drawing it on a piece of paper. There's so many things really when it comes down to it that you can break rules. And so if you think, oh, Scott says these are all the things I need to do. Well, that's not true. You can customize this for your own self. And there might be things on this budget that are completely irrelevant for you and you're not going to do that. And that's why I'm giving this to you as a spreadsheet where you can actually just delete that line or change it to something that is. Because some of you might say, you know what, actually photography or buying a camera or buying recording studio equipment is something that I am going to include in my budget, but that might not be relevant to everyone. So customize this for your own label. Finally, and most importantly, is remember to invest in yourself. One of the things I regret about when I started my label 12 years ago now, almost 13 years ago, I regret not investing actual cash. I invested a ton of sweat equity. That's implicit funds. But the actual explicit funds, taking money out of my pocket, it wasn't that much. It was here and there. And the reason was because it was just for fun and I didn't take it seriously. I didn't think that it was going to be anything serious. And I had my expectations low and my goals were low. And that's a huge mistake. And I actually wish I took out 1,000 or 5,000 or maybe even a student loan of 10,000 or a family loan and took our first project and pressed it to vinyl and got a distribution deal. You know what I mean? There's these things I just wish that I invested more. I wish I'd paid our videographers more. They were volunteer, and our photographers, they were volunteer at the time. And I'll tell you why. The reason is I think it holds us accountable. When we actually put skin in the game, when we actually put money down on the line, I think it makes us work harder. There's a record label right now that I'm thinking of, and this guy quit his job and he took out a loan and he's putting all this money into his first release. And I honestly feel like he has a better chance of being successful because he's put so much into this, and this has to work. If it doesn't work, he's in big trouble. And so that type of pressure actually motivates us and kind of lights a fire under us to do a better job at building our business and building our record label. So as we think about this, and like I said before, a lot of the items on this spreadsheet may not be relevant to you. But as you're thinking about, keeping your expenses low and maybe removing some things, we should also challenge ourselves to, no, let's actually put money into this thing, because it then may have a better chance of being successful and have a better chance of us being committed to it. Some of the categories that you can find in this free budget template that you can download at otherrecordlabels.com/budget is we're going to talk about A&R, some of the expenses with A&R. That's discovering artists and signing artists to your label. Administration stuff, just some basic stuff. Marketing is a big thing, but we're going to talk about more about marketing releases in a separate video about album release budgets. We'll talk about production, which is not too much production costs, maybe a little bit for the label in general. Some of the extra things that just pop up randomly. And again, these are things you can add to or delete the stuff that I put in here. Graphic design is a big thing, especially in the beginning, getting set up with your website and your logo. Registration, business registration, e-commerce, and setting up that, all of your storefronts, distribution, mainly talking about digital today, and then accounting, some accounting expenses. So make sure you download the spreadsheet so we can go through this together. But if you don't have it, that's okay. You can just watch this and I'll show you. Okay, so I've got my Excel sheet up here. And if you don't have Microsoft Excel, that's okay. You can open this in Google Sheets. Or if you have a Mac and you have Numbers installed on there, I think it'll open in Numbers too. This is honestly, this is completely, I've tried to keep the numbers pretty accurate. I've done a lot of research on these numbers, and there's some things that you can completely remove. And a lot of these, and I've tried to indicate where a lot of these are actual annual expenses. So there are some one-time setup fees, but just kind of the way the subscription model is moving towards these days. You'll notice that a lot of, especially software and services, are annual fees. And so anytime I came across a monthly fee, for example, web hosting on Squarespace, they're monthly and I've converted them to annual. Okay, so let's just go through this, and I have some notes here. Okay, so the first category is graphic design. Getting started with a logo. Now, listen, I put $500, and I think that's a fair price for building out a logo, but you might have a friend who's a graphic designer. You might be able to sketch something yourself and then have someone convert it to a black and white version, like a vector file. That's something that can be scaled up on t-shirts or you'll want to have a vector file. That's like an Adobe Illustrator file or an EPS file. You'll want your graphic designer to provide you with, if you have a colored version, you want a simple version, black and white, that can be used on letterhead or that can be used on pressing it to t-shirts and stuff. Color versions are hard to transfer. So you want an EPS version, you want a PNG version, that's a digital version with no background, a JPEG version, even the whole layered files if they create them in Illustrator or Photoshop. And so I think you could pay upwards of $2,000. I think you could get someone on Fiverr for under $500. And of course, you could do something yourself in Canva for free. So $500 is kind of a good spot. Now, that's a one-time cost, right? So that's good. Web design is the same thing. Honestly, you could do a super basic Squarespace site, and they have templates that make it look really nice. Wix is the same thing. Even I think MailChimp and stuff. And some people use Bandcamp as their website, or don't do a website at all. You could totally delete this line if you wanted to save money and see how that changes our budget. But, again, I wanted to be slightly realistic. And again, going back to investing in your record label. So I think that 500 kind of makes sense. Because you could find someone on Fiverr who might do a slightly better job than you. I mean, I'm not talking about an agency. A really small agency might set you up with a Squarespace using one of their templates and taking some of your images, and 500 could be realistic. I think, when we go back to talking about keeping our expenses low and the defense aspect of this, I honestly would use the Squarespace templates and keep it really simple, and don't, mess with the colors on the templates. They've been designed to look elegant. Just add some nice photos and away you go. And so you could even just drop this. Here's our grand total here, and we'll go through this in a second. But look, if I change this to 50, I've just saved, I've dropped it down if I completely remove it. So those are things. And obviously, listen, if you know how to design your own logo and you get this down to 0, and you're going to use Squarespace templates, you get this down to 0, we've just made a significant impact in our bottom line. So that's good. Merch, this is kind of getting started. You might want to do some stickers. You want to do maybe a couple one-offs, some mugs and some sweatshirts for you and your co-founder, that kind of thing. So that can vary. Various templates, here's the thing, when it comes to graphic design, you could do a one-time cost and hire someone to make you a template like this budget, for example, that you can then use. So let's say you wanted an album release budget. Now I'm going to give you one for free in another video, but you could pay somebody to create a budget for you and then you just change it for each thing. That's what I have with a press sheet. So every time I have a new release, I have a page that's already, it's a template, and I just change out the details for the new release, and I send that as a PDF to blogs and to writers and to curators and stuff. And so there's some, various templates, and I'm not talking about recording contracts. We'll talk about that in a second, but various templates that you can do. So our total budget for graphic design is $13.50. This is so fluid. Your budget could be, you could say, don't need templates, Scott. I'm not doing merch. And look, man, I don't need any of this stuff. I can do this all myself. And then our budget just dropped by like $1,500. So come on. You can totally do whatever suits you. Okay, registration. This totally varies on where you're located, what country you're in, what state you're in. A business name, on the average price for an LLC is $125 in America. And so that's way less in some states and a little bit more in other states. So $125, $130 is the average. And in some cases, that comes with a registration, like a business registration. In other cases, you have to register your business name separately, and that's about $200. Now, I didn't put a trademark in here. I guess I could put a trademark. Okay, I just changed my mind. I just threw a trademark in here because I forgot about that, and we're going to talk about it in a second. Okay, so like business name, LLC, and these will be, a lot of times they'll be annual costs. Now, I don't want to get into this now because it's a bigger discussion. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know a lot of businesses, not just record labels, but a lot of small businesses who operate without buying an LLC. And for some reason, a lot of you guys are like, that's the first thing I need to do, or I need to make business cards or whatever. It's like, no, the first thing you need to do is start making music and discovering music. And you don't need an LLC when you're getting started. It may not even be worth the expense in the early days because you're not making that much money and you're not legally required to do so in a lot of countries, a lot of states, because you're filing any income that you do make. You just file it as your own additional income on your personal taxes. And so you just operate as like a sole proprietor, and you don't really need, again, I'm not a tax expert, I'm not American even, so I can't really explain how it works for you. You don't really need to rush into all this, an LLC in a business name. But again, going back to point number 3 at the beginning of this, is if that makes you feel more official, that if that lights a fire under you, then go ahead, do it. A bank account. Business bank accounts sometimes have fees. I'll just put it at 0 because you can fill that in. It's good to have a bank account. It really is, especially if you can get one for free. I think it's really good to keep your finances separate from your personal finances. Now, you can still claim it on your own personal account for tax purposes, but it's nice to see, okay, I put $1,000 of shareholder investment into my bank account, and now it's gone, and our PayPal and our Stripe, our Shopify, our Bandcamp, everything is funneled into our bank account. And look, this past month we made $1,000 and we spent $1,500. That's not good. Or this month we spent $500 and we made $1,500. That's great. So separate bank account. Trademark. A lot of people like to do trademarks. I think it's important to check your trademark, to check that you're not infringing on someone. But if you have a super weird record label name, I don't think you need to be in a rush to get a trademark, because if you're just getting started, and first of all, you want to just double check, like check in Google that nobody else has your business name, and certainly that nobody else has your business name in the music industry. That's even worse. I mean, it's another thing if it's like you pick a record label name that shares a name with a coffee shop in Denmark. I think you'll be okay. I don't think they'll come after you. I mean, I don't even know if they'll have a leg to stand on. But it's important just to double check and be like, oh, my name is actually really close to another record label's name. That's dangerous. So, but at the same time, to rush out and trademark your own logo and your own name, very much like the LLC, that may be a lot of expenses up front. I just don't know if that's absolutely necessary. I think it's kind of like a little bit arrogant to think that people are going to be coming for your trademark. Talk to a lawyer. Legal is something I think is really important. And I think you could be spending about $500 because I know that you can actually get like a music attorney, and we have some music attorneys in our record label directory. You could check out, great people, and they'll charge you like $200 or $300 to come up with a bespoke contract that you can use for all of your artists. So you don't have to spend a lot of money in having a music attorney. And now, by the way, if you get a music attorney, have them talk to you about the LLC and your business name and a bank account and trademark and stuff. So you might want to pay them $250 to come up with a contract for your label, maybe a couple contracts if there's different scenarios. And then maybe an extra $250 just to shoot some questions at them for an hour or half an hour. I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. Okay, so we got $13.25 in registration. E-commerce, PayPal account you need, that's free. Stripe account you need, that's free. A Bandcamp label account is really good. A lot of great features. I'll have a link for it here. Some of these blue notes are links you can click to and get more information. And that'll cost you about $12 a year, I believe. Or sorry, $12 a month. So $240 for the year. Same thing with Shopify. Now, if you're running, Squarespace has commerce too. So you don't really, if you're running all of your label merch and stuff off of Bandcamp, you don't necessarily need a Shopify store. Some people like to do, they like to just, you get a higher percentage, right? Because with Shopify, it's pretty much just your monthly fee, and then your Stripe, I think, or PayPal will take like 1 or 2%, whereas Bandcamp takes like 10 to 15% from you. So I'm seeing a lot of labels now move to sites like Big Cartel or Limited Run to try to avoid some of the fees that Bandcamp has. And so some people are selling physical merch like vinyl and tapes and CDs off of their Shopify store. So if you wanted to go that route, then you're looking at about $300 a year for Shopify. Could cost you more if you want more features. It could cost you a little bit less too if you want less features. But a Bandcamp store could suffice. And I mean, look, you could get rid of the Shopify again, and you don't even need a Bandcamp label account. You could just use a regular account for free and then look at your e-commerce prices. Not that bad. Distribution right now, there isn't really like a physical distributor that you can just knock on their door and say, hey, please put all my records into record stores. It doesn't really work that way. You have to be a little bit more established. You could maybe work with a label group who represents you through a distributor, but then your margins get smaller and smaller. So today we're just talking about digital distribution. My favorite digital distributor at the moment is 3Tone Music, brand new on the scene, super affordable, tons of great features. I've been using them for a long time. I've linked to them here. And their annual fee is $158, and then they don't take any percentage of royalties, and they have a lot of cool services like Instagram verification and playlist pitching. So check them out on that link and on our website at otherrecordlabels.com/distro. So that's our only distribution cost right now. Accounting, there's a software we've talked about on this podcast many times, and you can check them out by going to I've linked to them here, but you can go to otherrecordlabels.com/royalties. And Infinite Catalog is a royalty management software, and they are $50 a month, I think, maybe. Yeah, about $50 a month for their basic model. And they're an incredible accounting software. It's an online software program, and I've done a walkthrough. I've done an interview with them. It's so cool. There could be like an annual fee of an accountant to do your taxes, and I don't know what that would cost. It depends on how much money you're making. So let's say $500. It could be less, could be more. You might be able, if for the first year, if it's not that much, you could do it yourself with like those tax things. There's like probably a line for like additional income or extra income outside of if you have a full-time job or a part-time job. And then maybe a credit card, like maybe a business credit card, like with an annual fee of $100 that gets you good points or something like that. That's something a lot of people have. $1,200 approximately for accounting. Artists, this is up to you. And an artist's advance is not really part of a record label budget. That's part of an album release budget. So I just didn't put anything for advances. And I just put $50 because honestly, when I had artists coming over a lot recording records, I was buying beer all the time, and I should have charged them against their album sales because it cost me so much in beer and food and them messing up my bathroom, but it was all good times. And you know what? Gas, going to meet people, let's say you're signing an artist in the town next to you and you're going to take them out for a beer or take them out for a coffee and you drive there. And so, yeah, there's probably $50. Honestly, that number's probably higher now that I think about all the gas to drive around and run your business and meet artists and stuff. This kind of falls under A&R. Let's change that to A&R, my bad. And so, yeah, so maybe we're looking at more $250. Let's change that. Let's change that to $250. Maybe that's $50 a month. Yeah, maybe more. Well, let's leave it at 250. Let's leave it with 250. That's like $20 a month. I don't know. I don't know what that is for you. You change that. Okay, administration, totally like random because like I've said 250. This actually could be way, way more because these things add up. Like I'm talking about like USB cables and like a CD burner. I bought a CD burner. Like that was an annoying purchase to make, and USB hubs and like just stupid stuff, like paper and envelopes, padded envelopes. That's shipping supplies. I kind of put that a little bit. I have it a little bit here, but that should also be sort of an album expense. But like, okay, like let's office supplies. Let's just say random $50, and then like shipping supplies random as well. Like I said 100 because one of the things I buy frequently is like a box of 100 cardboard boxes for shipping records, vinyl records. And that's $100. They're $1 each. And it's, oh man, it's such a pain because this big, huge box comes in the mail and it's literally a cardboard box full of cardboard boxes. It's the most unsexy, unexciting purchase you'll ever make in your life. So I put that on here just so I could tell that story. Okay, software for $100. Now I've included other stuff like Squarespace or Canva elsewhere in this budget. I don't know what your software might be. Going back to accounting, maybe you use Infinite Catalog for your royalty accounting, but you might need like QuickBooks, a membership to QuickBooks or something like that. There could be like just Microsoft Office. If you were to do something like Adobe Suite, I know a lot of you have like Photoshop. That's expensive. That's much more like $300 or $400 a year. So I put 100. Right now we have about 250 in administration, but that can get up really quick. And again, there's a great quote I want to share with you. What gets measured gets managed. What that means is that right now I'm saying administration would be like $250 a year. It's probably way more than that. It could be more like $2,500. And so it's important that you itemize everything that you're spending on, even those stupid things like paper and USB cables, because they add up. And you look at your bottom line and you're like, oh, I just put that on my personal credit card, or I paid that in cash, or I drove, I didn't keep the receipts for the gas receipts when I went to meet an artist that lived 2 hours away, that kind of stuff. Those things add up. And then all of a sudden you look at the year and you're like, wow, we were super profitable. It's like, no, you weren't, because you didn't claim this and Microsoft Office and Photoshop and gas and coffee and beer and that kind of stuff. So make sure you outline it a lot. I'm just putting some numbers here. You can change these on your own. Marketing is complicated as well because a lot of marketing is under record label releases. But I'm going to say web hosting. This is a great number from Squarespace. I use Squarespace. A lot of my friends use Squarespace. If you click that link, you can get 10% off from through other record labels through Squarespace. But I've been using them for my label and for other record labels actually, but for my label for probably over 10 years. I honestly want to say maybe 15 years. That doesn't make sense. Maybe 12 years. But anyway, but go with whoever you want. Their prices are competitive. Later is like a scheduling, social media scheduling. And so I've kind of included some of your social media tasks under marketing. If you were like getting really active with like TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook, I've used Later because let's say you create a graphic advertising an upcoming show or a showcase or an upcoming album. You can like use Later. That's the platform. It's like later.com, maybe. I'm not sure. You can use the platform to upload that image once and then schedule it to come out, let's say, on a certain day on all of those platforms I just mentioned. So it's really handy because if you're like me, you're an old geezer and you're like, I don't really want to spend too much time on my phone posting things. I want to work on music instead. So scheduling, using a social media scheduler, and it's pretty cheap. It's like $180 I put here for the year. Domain, that often comes free if you with Squarespace, but I've added it as an extra $15 a year. Canva is free, like a basic model, and you might find yourself using that because you have some like unexpected graphic design needs that come up as a founder. And until you have an art department at your record label, it's good to use Canva is a good tool, and you can pay more and do some cool video stuff. I use Canva to make canvases for Spotify for Artists. You know, those new like 15-second videos that play behind a song. What I've been doing is like, I take a video on my phone and then I use a filter on my phone, just a quick little like quick cuts. You can even use TikTok to film it and use filters or whatever. And then I upload it to Canva, and then download it from Canva and upload it to Spotify for Artists. So, and that's all just free. Email marketing is something that's like, so this would be, this is essential. Email marketing is huge. I've done a complete other video on email marketing. I'll link to it here. It's basically, I think it's otherrecordlabels.com/email marketing, maybe, or email. I'm not sure. I'll link to it on this template. But gosh, email is so huge. And I'm hearing from labels, and I know that email is like unsexy. It's an old platform. It's not as cool as TikTok or whatever, but like, I'm hearing from labels that like people are like slowly building up a mailing list, and then once a week or once a month sending out a blast to those people and getting sales from it. And it's like a way more intimate connection with your fans than, let's say, social media. You know, people on social media like scrolling really fast and whatever. So email marketing is important. It's a little expensive. I think it's like MailChimp's cheapest option here. Well, their cheapest option is like 0 up to like 2,000 subscribers. So once you get closer to 5,000, it's like it's like $10 a month. So marketing could be about $600 a year, but again, could be way higher. But you know what? Based on this, like taking out all of that marketing that you would do for individual album releases, just marketing of your label. Now, you could also, for like, gosh, for like $2,000 to $5,000 a year, you could pay a publicist to kind of like, they wouldn't work your releases. That's a different expense, but you could pay a music publicist to kind of just generally promote your label, have them on retainer. I'm not sure many publicists would do that, but maybe for a couple $100 a month, you could get someone who would just get you interviews for your label and just like help get your label out there. It wouldn't necessarily be, you'd have to pay individually for each new release. And then production. I put studio rentals, that's a day rate. So like there might be a time where like that's not an album related thing. Maybe you're going to do a Christmas song, get everybody on your label to do like a, do they know it's Christmas type of song. And so you pay for like one day to record this song, or maybe you're going to record like a label podcast or something. So I just threw a studio rental in there. That might come up once a year. That isn't something that can be, charged back to a specific release. Manufacturing supplies as well. Like sometimes, like I mentioned, the CD burner, I bought like a $50 CD burner off of Amazon so that I could burn CDs for some of the people who wanted CDs. So there's little things like that. I know people who've bought like a tape duplicator. Friends of mine bought like nice like razors to like make their own cassette cards at home. Video, a $500 video expense. This comes up a lot, and I would suggest, because everybody is moving towards YouTube and short form videos, that like you hire a videographer to do like a mini documentary about your label, maybe even a videographer / photographer. Let's put that in there actually, / photographer, because having like press photos of like you in your office and your label to help promote the label to put on your website, that's really cool to have. Same, like you could even just like working in your shipping records, making it look like you're a cool label, meeting with artists, your artists on stage, making like a little montage, like a 30-second video that you could put on your website as like your header image that just shows that you are real people. Because a lot of people start a label and they take like a stock photo that, you know what I mean? Like a stock music photo, and put that on their website. It makes their record label look fake. So showing real people doing real things. I think a videographer a couple times a year, or at least once a year, to do something label specific, not necessarily artist or release specific, but label specific, is good. So that's why our production cost might be about $900 to $1,000 a year. And then extras. Get some books. Go to conferences. You might want to handle the publishing for your artist. This gets complicated. I have a whole other thing about this that we can talk about another time, and I have other videos about music publishing. But I do my publishing through Three Tone Publishing the administrators, and I'll put a link here for that so that you can. Okay, yeah, I've included a Three Tone Publishing link, but it's about $244. I think it's a one-time fee. And then gifts. I mean, you know, sometimes, like I mentioned, you buy things for your artists. So maybe you buy them a Christmas present. So in that case, it might be more than that. That's a really cool thing, like a non-recoupable expense, and say, here, I just wanted to give you this. I've bought things for partners, not bribes, but like there was a digital distributor that was like really helpful for me many years ago, and I sent them like a bottle of Canadian whiskey. I don't know if that was appropriate, but they were thankful. And maybe gifts for fans too. Maybe there's things that I did an episode one time talking about super fans, and you might look at your spreadsheet at the end of the year and be like, there was one fan who bought all of our records, or there was one fan who spent the most. And you can get that data through Bandcamp or Shopify and be like, this was our biggest listener and our biggest supporter. And maybe you just send them a Starbucks gift card or some bonus records or something. So there's our whole budget. And again, right now we're coming in at about 7,000 US, and that's annual. That's for operating the label as a whole. That doesn't include making records or releasing records or paying advances to your artists. So that's not too bad. I mean, and again, you saw in some cases I was liberal, in some cases I was conservative. So this is all like a live spreadsheet. So you can change these numbers at will and look at what your number is. And it's mostly annual. But like if you take 7,000, this is actually 7,156 is like $590, $596 a month. So that can also help you. And so you're like, okay, with this budget, and maybe you want to go in and take out your fixed costs. So costs that like your logo and your web design are one-time costs. So let's take those out for a second. Let's say you just assigned $1,000 for your startup costs. Maybe your trademark, maybe your legal fee was one time. What else is one time? That's pretty much it, right? There wasn't much one time. Books, conferences, maybe one time. So if you break this down, okay, now your annual budget is $4,000. You divide that by 12. Now you're like, okay, $350, let's say, is our monthly expenses. That's really good to know. What gets measured gets managed. So now you're like, okay, I know that we got to make at least $350. So if you're selling a record for $20, okay, and let's say your profit on that record is $5. That means you got to sell 70 records a month to just meet your basic expenses, right? But of course, you're not just selling one record. You're selling one record, you're looking for licensing deals, you're getting streaming revenue, you're maybe getting publishing revenue or merch sales. And so all of a sudden you're like, okay, $350 based on this budget a month is my expenses. And so let's just try, let's look at 3 ways to make $100, or let's look at 10 ways to make $30 or more, right? If you look at 10 ways to make $60 a month, you're now covering your expenses and you're profiting. So the math is very simple, and I just want you to have this spreadsheet and play with it. You can download this for free at otherrecordlabels.com/budget. And we're going to do a completely separate budget when it comes to planning an album release, but this is record label specific. I hope you found it helpful. Please subscribe. Make sure you come to our website, otherrecordlabels.com, to get all of your resources for record labels there, including this budget template that you can download. Thanks for watching.